Troops are in the streets. Threats of violence hang over the city. The federal judge has issued an order. The governor has defied it. The governor speaks.
The point I want to make is that while every man should have the right to have his day in court, we should maintain the rights of the state in all things of self-government.
The scene is from our time, but the words are from another, spoken by William Henry Murray, once governor of Oklahoma. Known to some as the greatest champion of the common man, to others as a political demagogue, and to all as Alfalfa Bill. Just what kind of political creature was this man Murray? Was he really the rumpled rural lawyer he pretended to be? Or was he the brilliant constitutional student some claimed? Was he the state's outstanding politician or an impractical dreamer? He was last seen as a tired and eccentric old man, often with a load of books. But there was another time when, young and vigorous, he laid the cornerstone of a state. William Henry David Murray was only 17 years old when this picture was taken. His father, Uriah Dow Murray, was operating a grist mill in a small Texas town named Toadsuck when William was born in 1869. 2 years later, his mother died, and Dow Murray remarried a widow named Molly Green. Molly often felt a call of the spirit that threw her into puritanical tantrums, directed many times toward her 3 stepsons. When Bill was 12, he and his brothers ran away and put themselves through school. By the time he was 22, Bill was teaching school and nurturing a mustache. He later became an editor, politician, and lawyer. In 1898, he was looking for new frontiers when he landed in the Indian Territory town of Tishomingo and joined a law firm. Douglas Johnston, Chickasaw educator, was elected Chickasaw governor that same year with the support of Murray and his law partners. The next year, 1899, Murray spent $100 for a tribal wedding license and married Johnston's niece, Alice Harrow. Murray was now a Chickasaw and spent the next few years practicing in their courts. In 1903, he bought a 20-acre plot of land in the Washita River bottom and built a sturdy log cabin for his wife and family. The Washita home became a haven for Murray during his political campaigns. Tall trees towered over the cabin, and beneath them was a springboard bed. Here, Bill reclined for hours studying constitutions from almost every state in the Union, plus Switzerland, New Zealand, and Australia. Murray knew statehood was imminent, and he was determined to play a strong part in laying the foundation. And to him, the state constitution was the cornerstone. Neighbors called to get his ideas on farming techniques, and Murray became so well known for his advice that he was offered a job in the Agricultural Extension Service. In later years, he recalled it was here he earned his famous name of Alfalfa Bill.
One year, the crop of cotton was a failure, and they decided they'd grow iced potatoes. I attended one of these meetings, and after the business of the potatoes were over, a request came from George Watkins, now living in Marshall County, Oklahoma, that I make a speech on how to grow alfalfa. As everyone knew that I was the only man in the country that had any alfalfa growing, the first south of the Canadian River. The newspaper man asked me to write an article on how to grow alfalfa, and I did so on alfalfa and hogs, the most profitable way to grow it. He drew a headline across this paper, Alfalfa Bill himself on alfalfa. And the name then stuck. It's always been Alfalfa Bill ever since.
When the Constitutional Convention was called in Guthrie in 1906, Murray's hours of study and glib tongue put him in the office of president. He had already been the only white man in the Sequoia Convention that had attempted to gain statehood for Indian Territory. Murray refused to turn over a final draft of the Constitution when an injunction was brought against it. 500 certificates quickly appeared with a caricature of Bill Murray in one corner with the Constitution sticking defiantly from his hip pocket. They were issued to Bill's followers and stamped with a cocklebur for Cocklebur Bill, a name given to Murray by his enemies. Those given the certificates became members of the Squirrel Rifle Brigade and pledged to support Murray with a call to arms if that proved necessary. The Constitution was ratified by the people in September 1907. It was a rambling, wordy document. President Teddy Roosevelt had not concealed his disapproval, but signed. And when Oklahoma became a state at last, Bill Murray disbanded the convention, having spent almost $4,000 of his own money keeping it in session. Murray was Speaker of the first legislature in 1907. He was a delegate to the Democratic National Convention in 1908, and in 1910 was defeated in his first bid for the governor's chair. He then spent 2 terms in Congress. But when he returned from Washington, he was defeated for governor again in 1918 and decided the folks back home had deserted him. Murray traveled to South America and in 1924 returned with tales of a land that could be agricultural utopia. He pointed towards Bolivia and soon packed 25 other families off with him to 192,000 acres of land leased from the Bolivian government. The village of Aguarirenda was the first of 3 proposed settlements Bill had hopes of establishing. He was now called Bolivia Bill, and he supervised all the farming as well as publishing another constitution, a set of regulations for the settlement. His dreams were shattered in 1929 when Bolivia foreclosed on the 198-year lease. He returned with $12 in his pocket, but it was election year again, and Bolivia Bill felt the folks from the forks of the creek needed him. Newspapers ignored his comeback for fear of encouraging what they considered to be a joke. Bill was serious, though, and so were his enthusiastic backers. From their dubious wealth of talent, they produced a campaign song and borrowed from Stephen Foster to put it to music.
Bill Murray of dear Oklahoma, we'll stand by you. Though ever other men as glorious, none are so great as you. We'll trust your leadership, oh Billy, wherever you go. We'll stay with Oklahoma's governor, we'll fight this through with you.
On election night, Murray sat quietly in a hotel room smoking his cigar until he heard the crowds outside shouting his name. He was elected by a 100,000 vote majority. On January 12, 1931, 12,000 of his avid followers crowded the Capitol steps to see the sage of Tishomingo sworn in as their 9th governor. 91-year-old Dow Murray left his sickbed to give the oath of office to his son. Murray's primary campaign had been waged against Frank Buttram, a millionaire oil man. And with Oklahoma suffering from the Depression and the beginnings of the Dust Bowl, it was easy for Murray to paint himself as the savior of the farmer. One overall gentleman summed things up when he said, "Bill's a-going to get the job did like it oughter be did." Murray held on to this confidence throughout his 4 years in office, but others were shocked by a leadership which soon became unconventional, to say the very least. A set of office rules were posted almost as soon as Murray left the inauguration stand. Don't ask me about the weather. The Weather Bureau is in Washington. Don't try to deceive me. Be brief and to the point, because I suspect your motive already. Don't ask me how I feel, because I may feel like damn it and tell you so. Don't try and tell me how I was nominated and elected. Perhaps I know more about that than you do. On more than one occasion, visitors to his office were to be greeted with a thundering, "What in the hell do you want?" During his campaign speeches, he had promised to abolish the jobs of half the clerks on the state payroll. But by the end of his first year, there were more clerks than ever before. In another campaign speech, he had told the cheering throngs that he would move into a tent and rent the governor's mansion for more revenue. He further declared he would plant the front yard of the mansion to potatoes. Later, as he moved into the official residence of the governor, Bill was to declare this statement had been a joke blown out of proportion. But there were other proposals to come. At one time during his term, Murray was to suggest that a dormitory be built on the Capitol grounds to house the legislators during their sessions. This, in his words, would guard the lawmakers from the lobbyists, the evils of poker playing, liquor, and women. In his defense, it should be said that he assumed leadership at a difficult time. 1931 was a bad year for all the United States, but of them all, Oklahoma seemed to have more than its share of troubles. I never had what is now called an inferiority complex, Alfalfa Bill said of himself, but my complex was that I could achieve or accomplish anything if I tried. Now that he was in the office he had wanted for so many years, Murray was determined to run it with the executive force he felt was necessary. He never let it be forgotten that he had laid the foundation for the Constitution and was called by many the father of Oklahoma. The first year in office he proved to be a stern parent. July 1931, Governor Bill Murray, commanding officer of the Oklahoma National Guard, having declared war on Texas in the federal courts, led his troops onto the field of battle, a Red River bridge near Durant. The objective was to liberate the bridge which connected Oklahoma and Texas near the present US 69. The bridge had been a joint effort of the two states, but the Texas Toll Bridge Company gained a federal injunction to keep the bridge closed. When Texas Rangers were placed at the south end of the bridge to keep it closed to traffic, it was more than Murray could take. He told the guardsmen, just take their guns and tobacco and give them a light kick in the pants. Generally, it was a very friendly war. Not a rifle shot was fired, but there were plenty of verbal volleys, as in most Cold Wars. Murray contended an old Spanish law put both banks of the river in Oklahoma. Passing motorists found themselves in publicity pictures with the smiling governor, being assured that it would not be long before the bridge opened. A judgment was rendered against Oklahoma, but the Federal Circuit Court of Appeals reversed the decision. Murray's first call-up of troops ended in a smashing victory. From that time forward, Murray referred to the militiamen as "my guards." National attention began to focus on the governor, who wore a campaign hat and stood in line to get his portion of field rations. Murray declared his use of the troops was a way to stay the hand of oppression. Just 1 month after his victory at Red River, Murray was meeting with Guard officers again for his next engagement, a military attack against falling oil prices of the Depression. Martial law was declared against all the major and most of the independent oil producers in the state. The oil fields surrounding the Capitol grounds bore the brunt of military activity. The governor shut down the wells after an overproduction of oil had forced prices as low as 10 cents per barrel. He issued an order to oil producers to put a minimum price of $1 a barrel on the product, and when they failed to comply, he issued an executive order shutting down the wells. Only small stripper wells were allowed to remain in action, and slowly the price climbed. Major oil companies threatened to take the case to federal courts, but they never did. When the price climbed to near the dollar mark, Murray withdrew his guards. Some citizens worried about military dictatorship, but Alfalfa Bill found soldiers a very direct way of dealing with his troubles, and there was a national election ahead. And looking ahead, Alfalfa Bill Murray decided to become a candidate for president. He began making campaign appearances outside Oklahoma. In this case, he attended a huge picnic in Los Angeles along with fellow Oklahoman Will Rogers. The picnic was actually a reunion for those Oklahomans who had forsaken the Sooner State for the greener pastures of California. Perhaps it was felt this was a fertile field for harvesting votes in the Democratic Convention, which was rapidly approaching. Certainly, there were enough Okies in California. With fellow Democratic workers at his side, the father of Oklahoma boarded a train for the 1932 Democratic Convention in Chicago. He said, "If I was president, I'd want to control the Interior Department, the Federal Banking Board, and the foreign loans, so what's the use of worrying?" But when he arrived in Chicago, he was certain he was riding a fast, dark horse. Most political experts saw him as a comic relief to what was shaping up as a boring, formal nomination for Franklin Delano Roosevelt. The Murray for President clubs back home gave Bill their wholehearted support with such campaign songs as "Hoover made a soup hound out of me." If Murray ever felt Oklahoma needed him, he felt more than ever that the nation must have his services for survival. Bread, butter, bacon, and beans was Murray's campaign slogan to reach the hearts of the Depression multitude, and it was served to them with great enthusiasm. The crowds loved it. One observer remarked, "He put on the best show Chicago has seen in months. He was better than the heavyweight wrestling match." On the convention floor, Alfalfa Bill was nominated by another Oklahoma governor, Henry S. Johnston, and Johnston pulled out all the stops of old-fashioned oratory, invoking the names of Washington, Jefferson, Jackson, Lincoln, and St. Paul. The delegates found that when Murray took to the stand, he was more eloquent than they had expected, but it was difficult to fight the promises of the jutting-jawed man from New England who promised a New Deal. When the votes were in, Bill Murray had only the 22 from Oklahoma plus one more, his brother George from North Dakota. When he came back to Oklahoma, Murray kept up a daily routine that provided good newspaper copy between his barbs at the federal government and his flair for showmanship within his own reign. On one occasion, reporters found their chairs chained to the wall in the governor's office because he didn't like folks with their halitosis and darn fool faces plumb in mind. With his love for raw onions as a disinfectant for the stomach, it is doubtful if too many people got plumb in his face, with or without their chairs chained to the wall. He never failed to put himself in the favor of the farmers when he attacked the rich. The utility companies were his favorite target, and on one occasion he threatened to fight them with bombing planes, submarines, grape shot, and shrapnel, and everything necessary to bring them to obedience to the law and reasonable rates. As time ran out on his term of office, Alfalfa Bill was still busily assailing the policies of the Roosevelt administration. The familiar cigar left the Capitol office in 1934. He felt that only literal interpretation of the Constitution could save the state and the nation, and he could not bring himself to countenance the increasing federal controls of the New Deal. In 1936, Murray introduced the Republican nominee for president, Alf Landon, at an Oklahoma City rally. Politically, it was a mistake. Two years later, President Roosevelt came to Oklahoma City as a favor for Senator Elmer Thomas and was received by throngs of cheering Oklahomans during a parade through downtown. It was 1938, and Alfalfa Bill Murray was making a fourth bid as governor of the state. Thousands of persons crowded around the speaker's stand to hear FDR refer to Murray as a candidate nationally known as a Republican, while heaping praise on the candidacy of Senator Thomas.
Senator Thomas has been of enormous help to me and to the administration in keeping me advised as to the needs of your state and as to how we in Washington could help to meet them.
Murray then filed for the Senate race against Thomas, The Supreme Court ruled his petition was filed too late. His last fling at politics was in 1940 and 42 when he lost in runs for Congress and the Senate. But the Murray name did not lose its magic. In 1950, Johnston Murray, the second son born to William and Alice, was elected governor of Oklahoma. And the aging Alfalfa Bill stood on the same steps in the same January chill and administered the oath of office to his son just 30 years after his own father had stood with him. The physical surroundings were the same, but everything else had changed. The old issues, the old political passions were gone, replaced by new issues and problems the old man no longer understood. Whether times were better because or in spite of Bill Murray was of no great importance now.
Mr. Murray, it is a real privilege and a pleasure for me to present to you your son, of whom we all know you are proud, the Honorable Johnston Murray. I've heard of him. You want me to read your card,
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to ask him to read the oath because I can't see to read with a son in front of him. I'll ask him to read it.
I, Johnston Murray, do solemnly swear that I will support, obey, and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Oklahoma, and will discharge the duties of my office with fidelity, that I have not paid or contributed either directly or indirectly any money or any other valuable thing to procure my nomination or election, except for necessary and proper expenses expressly authorized by law, that I have not knowingly violated any election law of the state.
On that day, 3 decades seemed a short time indeed. There is little doubt that as Bill Murray stood next to another of his sons on the speaker's platform, his mind played back over the many years he had served the state of Oklahoma. His rewards had been largely a matter of personal prestige, but on his 80th birthday, he received a $1,000 check from a group of Oklahomans who called themselves the Squirrel Rifle Brigade No. 2. The money was a partial payment for the money he spent keeping the Constitutional Convention together. The people of Tishomingo also remembered their famous son in 1950 at the Murray State College of Agriculture. 52 years before, Bill Murray had arrived in the same town, owing the buggy driver half of his $2 fare. Now the 80-year-old sage viewed the $3,000 monument unveiled in his honor. In a halting speech before the last crowd he was to address, Murray said, "I would be less than human if I did not appreciate this manifestation of my achievements. Frankly, I did not know I merited such an honor." But old-timers in the crowd remembered another Bill Murray who had told them, "I never had what is now called an inferiority complex. My complex was that I could accomplish anything if I tried." Alfalfa Bill's long life came to a close in St. Anthony's Hospital, Oklahoma City in 1956. In his last months, he had been almost totally deaf and blind, struggling to the end to sell his books on Oklahoma and constitutional theory. These and the Constitution under which the state still operated were his real monuments, he felt, and on them would he be judged at the bar of history. To this, he seemed content. In that October, he suffered a stroke, lingered a few days in a coma, and then on the 15th of the month, he died.